there's so much to say about our speaker. I made some notes. My father's safest thing to do. I think that you will find the speaker was very interesting indeed, and very relevant here in Cricklewood as well, from both points of view. First of all, this Nora Marshall has lived in the same house in Temple Road since 1940, which is pretty rare, I think. Very rare indeed. And in fact, she left school at age 14, and then this is really, on my calculations, very rudely, you were born in 1921,
That's right.
I think. And then, in 1986, took a GCE in English, which is a pretty rare achievement, frankly. And she's now aged 87. She's been a very active person. I've learned that she ran a playgroup in the Gladstone Park Centre for 7 years. She also, in fact, knitted for premature babies at the North Park Hospital. And the entire record is of action, as you will see in a moment. Anyway, tonight, Mr. Marshall is going to speak about memories of Cricklewood during wartime. Mr. Marshall, please.
Well, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me at the back? No. Yeah. Oh, dear.
Need a mic.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
Okay. So I moved into the house in Temple Road in 1940. The outside of the houses are similar. They've got slightly different porches, but everybody had a wrought iron gate and railings on the copings and between the houses, and these were confiscated at a later date for the war effort, but they did lie in Hyde Park for ages. I don't know whether they ever used them, but I miss them. Inside, first time I went inside, met the landlady, and she owned quite a few of the properties there, and some of them were empty because when the men were called up, wives didn't want to stay on their own, so they went back to Mum, and she wanted assurance that my husband wouldn't be called up. And as he was working in Smith's in the tool room as a tool room miller, this wasn't very likely. So she showed us round the inside. And each room had got an open fire grate, and the kitchen just had a sink and a copper that was built in that had a fire underneath that you had to heat the water. A fairly new cooker and 4 open shelves. That was the kitchen. But it did have one luxury. It got a bathroom. Now, I'd not lived with the bathroom. Mine was the tin bath hanging up outside, brought in on Friday scenario. It had electric light, but no points, no power points, because there was no washing machines, no fridges, no vacuum cleaners or anything like that. And there was a lot of brown paint, which I didn't like very much. Anyway, so she offered us the flat, but there were rules. The windows, window sills, black and white tiles on the porch, and the brass on the front door had got to be cleaned regularly. The dustbins were kept outside in the garden, which had to be tended properly, the garden, so that no weeds grew. And chopping firewood on the back doorstep was definitely forbidden. Now I'm going to start forgetting things, aren't I? Anyway, she used to come for the rent every Monday, and there were no complaints, so everything was okay. There were no cars in Temple Road in 1940, but Smiths did have a long cycle track for their workers, and that was well used. And Smiths was all round us. Apart from the main building on the front, It went right up to our little block with a very high wall at the side, and then a shorter wall at the end of our garden, and then it went all the way along Langton Road. And when the whole place was demolished in 20 odd years ago, is it? They found a cluster of little workshops and mews where horses were kept for horse buses. Now, nobody knew about that, but we were told about it. Before it was Smith's, it was Stoll's Film Studios. And some of the older residents told me that they used to act as extras in crowd scenes. And they were quite used to seeing famous actors of the time. And in fact, we had an actor living in Temple Road, Valentine Dial. He was known as the Man in Black. He did film work, but he was mostly known on the radio, or the wireless as we called it then. My next door neighbour introduced herself to me, and we became very good friends, and we used to go shopping nearly every day because we didn't have fridges to keep stuff, and you had, you think about that. The shops in the Broadway now are more or less the same as they were, like independent butchers and greengrocers and food stores and things like that. Not the same people, except the butchers on the corner of Mora Road has been in the same family for 3 generations. And the young man told us, didn't he, this? I confirmed it with him. There were sort of a few shops that everybody remembers. Is the Burton's men's shop that had the billiards hall over the top. And the 3 pubs, the 3 main pubs, the Crick, the Crown and the Windmill were there then. And it did have a Woolworths and a Boots Chemist and an old time Sainsbury's, not supermarket, there was no supermarkets. And in there they used to chop butter up with pats, and chop it into little bits, wrap it into greaseproof paper, and the meat, the bacon hung, and they cut it for you while you waited, and the cheese was cut with a wire. And biscuits were sold in square tins with glass lids. And if you were lucky enough to be there when it was coming to the end, you could get pennyworth of broken biscuits for the kids. There was also, of course, the cinema, where Summerfield's is now, the Queen's Cinema. And my friend Mary and I used to go to the early showing for 9pence, a 9penny ticket. And of course the roller skating rink and the dance hall were there then. That's where we used to go and do our shopping anyway. We didn't really venture very far. Occasionally went into Kilburn, but we mostly shopped in the Broadway. And there we bought our rations. And food was very, very important because it was so scarce. I mean, we had like 2 ounces of butter and 2 ounces of margarine, which was ghastly stuff. It was sort of bright yellow, hard, and really earned its nickname. We used to call it cart grease. And it was like 2 ounces of tea and 4 ounces of sugar and meat, and everything was rationed, practically everything. And that was regular rations. We more or less got that. Points for things like jam and tinned stuff and flour and things like that. And do you remember the bread? The bread wasn't refined, but it wasn't like our wholemeal. It was a sort of a grey colour. Didn't look very. That wasn't rationed, but it was often in short supply. So if you queued up for an hour and waited for bread and then there was none left, that was hard luck. And fruit and vegetables, of course, were very basic. We only had root vegetables and green vegetables, and only got salad and fruit in the summer, when you know, because it was grown here, but we didn't import very much. And the meat ration, now everything else was by ounces, but the meat was sold by money because of the different cuts, which otherwise everybody would want the best steak, you know, their 6 ounces, whatever it was. So we had a shiller's worth of meat, and most of the time, threepence of that had got to be corned beef. I wouldn't like to tell you how many times what we tried to make with corned beef, shepherd's pie and rissoles and all sorts of things. And then of course, thanks to America, we got spam and dried egg. The dried egg was fine for cooking, but you couldn't make nice creamy scrambled egg with it, but it was very useful. And of course, some things like bananas and oranges were very, very scarce, and they were only on children's book, and the bananas were nearly always black by the time you got them, and you could say queue for a long time and get one banana. But I did ask my doctor if that was all right for children to eat, and he said that was the only way that they should eat bananas, as when the skin was black. So our shopping, as I say, we had to go nearly every day, and we had a wicker basket because there was no plastic then, and there was no plastic packing. And our 1 or 2 eggs that we were rationed with had got to be carried home in a bag. There were no egg boxes, and there was no, so you were lucky to get home with them whole, but I mean that was general anyway. Now the sirens, for a few months there wasn't very much going on, but later in 1940, I think in about the autumn, we were woken up in the middle of the night by the air raid wardens because an oil bomb was dropped on Smith's, and one part of it was completely burnt out, but just for safety's sake we all had to get up and go down to St Michael's Church Hall, spent a couple of hours there until the firemen had got the fire under control. Other places that the bombs were dropped on, the railway lines, I think there was a buzz bomb dropped in Mora Road, but the worst one was the direct hit in Ivy Road, where 10 people were killed. They also dropped a few in Gladstone Park, and places like Wilson Green that you could often hear. I mean, if we didn't have a bomb drop, we got the shaking and the cracked walls and perhaps broken windows and things like that. Now, when we first moved in, there was an air raid shelter in the garden, but as a third of it was sunk into the ground, as soon as it rained, it got full of water. So that was absolutely useless. So for some time, we put a mattress under the stairs and slept in there at night. Later on, we got another kind of air raid shelter, which was indoors, and it was called a Morrison shelter, and it was about 6'6" long. It was steel with solid metal holders to hold it, so that we used it to eat off in the day, and then had the mattress underneath it and slept there at night. That wouldn't have stopped us with a direct hit, but it would, if we were, if rubble and that came down, we were saved that. Now, we got used to the sirens, but when they started dropping the doodlebugs, that was another thing, because they were unmanned, so they didn't need the cover of darkness, so they came all day, and they would roar along and then stop suddenly, and then you ducked because it's going to fall straight away. And then when they sent even worse things, the V2 rockets, that was the time then that I took my children, by that time I'd got 3 children, up to Yorkshire, because that really was scary. but I think we were up there till March. We came back in March. And things had quietened down a little bit by then. We used to listen to the radio. We had a radio. I can't remember how we worked that because there was no points. I know I used to plug my iron into the light socket in the ceiling, but I think we must have had accumulators, did we, that had to be recharged for radio. Well, we called them wireless in those days. And there was a programme every day giving food hints. And one of the most famous one was Walton Pie. Lord Walton was the Minister of Food. And this Walton Pie, they said, you know, was something you could serve up to your family. It was a pastry made with dripping, and inside was sliced potatoes and onions. Onions were scarce for some reason. We couldn't often get onions, but carrots, potatoes and onions. And I think a stock cube, and this was put out on the radio as a dish worth having. I don't think there's a great deal more to say, but I have only read about in books about, and it's quite interesting. I would like to plug this book because that does talk about what was it called? The bomb that was dropped in the Broadway. It was one of the heaviest bombs. Landmine. Landmine.
Quite early on.
And it didn't explode, but there's a very interesting little bit about that in this book. The fact that it didn't explode, when they investigated, they found that it was filled with sawdust. And it was made in Czechoslovakia. So the worker that made it must have risked his life to save. That would have been a terrible loss of life because they were terrible things, those landmines. But I didn't know about that until I read that in this book, and that is a very interesting book because it goes back even before the First World War, when railways came to Cricklewood, which made it into the busy little place it is now. Have I left anything out? Yes, and also another book I read about the importance of the Dollis Hill post office. That was very hush-hush. We knew something was going on then. There was a lot of secret. A lot of the members of Parliament came there, didn't they, and had their meetings there. It was sort of a place that, as I say, it was quite secret. I don't think I can say very much more, have I?
Roy, you've done ideal length there.
Yes. If you've got any questions that might jog my memory for something else.
Please.
I've asked them out the time, actually. I live in Ivy Road, and Connie Wells, who sadly since left us, she's the one who actually told me about the bombing in Ivy Road.
Yes.
And I've always been surprised to know why, or saddened to know why there has never been a plaque.
Oh, I wouldn't know about that. I don't know. Do you know anything about that? No.
Connie was actually living there at the time, and she knew one of the ladies who was killed.
Yes.
And she sat one winter's afternoon telling me the story, and I thought,
I know. Well, that was the worst thing in this particular area because of the loss of life. The 10 people. It was a direct hit.
There was a woman who was pregnant or something.
Yes, yes, and I think, I don't know whether it's, because the tales you hear, and if you're not there you don't know, but I did hear a story that a man was shaving and cut his throat when sort of accidentally, I suppose. But what I haven't covered is the marvellous work done by air raid wardens and fire watchers and the fire service and the people with ambulances. They did marvellous work in taking people out of rubble and things like that. I mean, we were at war, and it's only since I've been thinking back about the war that it hit me that we were at war. We could have been killed at any time. I mean, you know, we've got the, as I say, those people, and of course the ACAT boys, which were all around the coast, you know, trying to shoot down the enemy planes. And I think that if I did lie awake at night, I was really thinking, what can I cook for dinner with another 3 penny worth of corned beef? Well, thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, we've got another. Yes.
Did the school stay open throughout the war?
Yes, because of course I didn't have school children. I didn't have any children at all until I moved there. And of course there was evacuation, and they did close some of the schools. I think there's a bit in the book about it, but I think the schools were still open, but because some of them came back, some of them couldn't settle and came back. Schools and the libraries were open, weren't they? And as I say, the cinemas were open. I don't think a great deal closed. Because we couldn't go very far. You couldn't go on holiday, you couldn't get to the coast because it was all covered with wire and things like that. But I mean, you could go to the park. We used to go to the park and see. Yes.
I have a question. Do you remember when it used to be Stoll Studios at all?
No, that was before. I mean, that must have been in the. But I don't know how long Smiths had been there, but before that it was. Well, I mean, when 1940, people of 60 years old were mostly moving into new property. I think they were built about 1900. Do you know? You got it on your... No. So I should think probably Stoll Studios must have been about the same. It must have been early films.
Yeah, I heard that there used to be munitions, or was that related to Smith and the Smith factory? Munitions?
No, well, they made instruments, that, like the panels for the planes, and very fine instruments and things like that. And of course that was another thing, you weren't allowed to tell people that because they'd got a slogan, careless talk costs lives. So you didn't point out these things to you had to keep quiet about it.
Do you remember that one?
Pardon?
Exactly,
yes, you.
Does everybody know where Smith's was? My mum talks about Smith's. Does everybody know where Smith's? You know
where
Matalan is
you
now?
You know where? Oh yes, where Matalan is now. That's which to be Smith's.
Did it go all the way up to past Stoll Close and backed onto?
Backed onto where Kay lives.
Yes, that's right. Kay's is the first row.
Okay.
And there's a block of 5, like 10 flats, and they were the only ones left, and all the rest round it, from the top of Temple Road right the way round the back to where the children's playground is now, was all belonged to Smith's.
Right the way to where Wicks is and the bus garage, where just before the
and
the
can I ask you, the houses on Temple Road, they were built in 1930, was it?
Oh no, before then.
Oh, were they?
Yes, because I know when I moved in 1940, there was an elderly couple living right opposite me, and they just retired. So, presuming, I think men worked till 65 then, and they moved in as they were married into new property. That was a new house. So, saying they were in their 20s, that would have been about 1900, because I'm talking about 1940. So if you take another 20 years off, say they were in their 24 or something like that. So they must have moved in.
Because someone told me that they used to be, for policemen, the flats on Temple Road, but obviously that's not true then. That, no.
What, allocated just to police?
Yeah, that's what somebody told me.
I can't even remember a policeman being
Nothing new there then.
There was some elderly people, I mean, in their 60s. I know there was one lady living 2 doors away from me. I don't know whether she was a spinster or a widow, I can't remember now, but she wouldn't take her clothes off at night to go to bed in case anything happened and the warden would see her in her 90. She wouldn't have that, so Mary and I used to go in and make her a tea in the morning and make sure she got undressed and got washed and that for the next night. And another lady across the road was absolutely terrified of thunderstorms. When there's a thunderstorm, she would she'd cover up the mirrors, pull her curtains, and get into bed and pull the blanket over her. But it didn't matter if the sirens had gone. On a Saturday evening, she used to go up to the Crick Hotel for a half a pint of milk stout. She would brave the sirens, which was terrifying. Oh, one thing I haven't talked about is clothes rationing. Of course, clothes were rationed too, and household linens. I don't even remember buying anything, and people didn't have the amount of clothes they've got now. I think it was the rule of 3. You had one on, one in the wash, and one in the drawer. So there was washing done every day. But of course, there was no man-made fibres. So I did a lot of make-do and mending. I used to turn the shirts, collars and cuffs and sheets side to middle, and I seemed to spend my life darning woolen socks and pullovers because, as I say, things wore out very quickly, you know. But the only thing that wasn't on ration in that line was black material to make curtains, because we had to black out all our windows. And black skirts got ever so fashionable at that time. I've had rayon stockings because we couldn't afford silk, but there was no nylon, of course, nothing in that. And we did a lot of handing down, you know, if somebody was having a baby, they would gratefully have the cot and the pram and perhaps baby clothes if they survived. There's a lot of knitting done and unpicking jumpers to make socks and things like that. There was yeah, we didn't have a lot of time to get into mischief or anything like that, you know. And people were very, very, you know, because we were all in the same boat. It doesn't matter how much money you had, you couldn't buy anything else unless you dealt with the black market. And I was never approached, you know, no George Cole's person, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, you know, do you want half a pound of butter and that sort of thing. And so no, I don't know about that. But there was, people didn't row or anything like that, except perhaps family rows over their 2 ounces of butter, because everybody wanted their little 2 ounces of butter. And it was impossible if you had a family, how could you keep it all separate? But they were always saying, you pinch some of my butter, you know, it's more than this. Because 2 ounces of butter is not very much, you know. But it was very precious. Food was very precious. And this is why I can't really stomach when I hear that the average household throws away £400 of food every year.
Nothing ever gets thrown away in Mum's house.
Did they have...
Sorry, there's a gentleman back there who has his hand up.
I just wanted to ask you about Samuelson's. I understand where...
Yes, now I've been trying to place where that was, because at the top of Temple Road there was Robinson's removal storage place. Then there was a wool shop and a shoe repairers. Now I think Samuelson's was in that next block between the
just next to Manor,
pub, wasn't it?
Next to the Manor Fitness Centre, there's an old Russian
carpet. Yeah, the place that's been abandoned, hasn't it?
If you go into that place, it's
Yes.
still got the signs on the doors
Yes.
from the directors of photography and stuff.
Yeah.
And where was Samuelson's anything to do with the other film company you mentioned? Were they related?
Oh, I don't think so. No, I think they had other places, didn't they? They had the production village up
That's right.
and the place at top of Dunhill Lane where they did the lighting bit there. But no, I don't think there were anything to do. I don't know much about the stole.
the production village, that's one in Cricklewood Lane, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
it's not there
It was,
anymore. It
yes,
was
yes.
there. Yeah, that was
It was
Samson's.
in Cricklewood Lane.
Yeah.
Yes.
I used to go there
But
for a drink
the
myself.
Sandwiches did have a big place along there, but some of them sort of blocked out, I can't
Closed the
remember.
pavilion,
Of
someone was
course,
murdered there.
there was none of this fast food outlet. And I do remember that the Broadway was much cleaner in those days. You know, shopkeepers, they took great pleasure in keeping the front of their shops clean and that sort of thing. They didn't have bulging black bags. And talking about the regulations of, well, it wasn't the landlady's regulations, this one, but the dustbins used to be kept out in the back garden, and the dustman used to come through on collecting days to take it out and bring it back again, because I must say I do loathe those wheelie bins in front of my windows in the front room. I can't keep looking out on them.
This lady here's got another question.
I just wondered, were the allotments there during the war? You know, on the other side of the tracks?
Yes.
Yes, yes, they were,
I
because
would've thought they were
I
busy.
didn't know much about that, you know.
Yeah, they certainly were.
Yes.
Quite certainly were.
If you're interested in that, if you haven't got that book, it's called Cricklewood Railway Terraces.
I gave
You
it
can
away.
Get it in.
I had it and gave it to someone who came
Oh.
to work in my house who lived there as a child.
Uh-huh.
So I
Yes,
gave it to
because
them.
that's ever so interesting about the railway cottages, you know.
The independent bookshop in Kilburn.
No, you can get them here.
Oh, here?
Didn't we get one? You got one here, yes. Yes, yes.
Right,
Yes.
this lady here wanted, I got interrupted her.
Yes,
before.
sorry.
This lady, then that gentleman there, and then this gentleman here.
I just wondered, like at the end of the war, if they had street parties and things.
Oh,
around here.
yes, yes, we did have that too, yes. Yes, that was, yes, children had jelly for the first, well, not the first time, because you could get those on points, but just had them for, yes, talking about food, I remember talking about this.
Food, Mum. Back to food.
Back to food. Well, it was very important, it's the only thing that kept us alive. One of the tips they gave on the radio was that because you couldn't get bananas, and children like bananas, you could boil parsnips and mash them up and pour the custard on. The children wouldn't know. Yes.
I'd just like to ask about the bomb again in Ivy Road.
Yeah.
Because we live in Olive Road, and the houses we live in, 3 of them were demolished during the war by a bomb. And I wonder if it would be the same bomb.
I think it was actually. I don't know about that.
Well, what's interesting, they rebuilt the house very quickly, I think 1947 or 1948.
Yeah.
With the same style, but you can tell that they're different
It's
because
different, yes,
the bricks
because
are
the
slightly
ones in Ivy
different.
are not, are they? They're completely
Well, I don't
different.
know where it is in Ivy, so that's what I
It
wondered.
lies back in a little bit on
Right.
Ivy Road.
On the
Right, left hand.
yes, on the right side, only one house went, number 46, I think, or 44, and then there's a whole much larger area on the left-hand
Yes,
side.
that's right. It goes round.
With
to
a
the
modern square in place.
Yes, that's
modern
right. Modern
construction.
houses.
Yes.
Yes.
Was
You can't
that
miss it.
is that the sort of Cricklewood end?
No,
About halfway up.
halfway.
Yes, about halfway up.
All
there.
right.
Excuse me, it's opposite Ken's place.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And Ken's, I think,
So our
48
bomb must be a different one then, because we're down this end of
Yes,
Olive Road.
yes, that's right. It was. It's listed of because I think the Ivy Road one actually happened when I was up in Yorkshire, when I took my children up there, because I was up there for about 7 months or something like that, and I think that happened then. But
There's a bit in the book here about the Blitz, and it does say high explosive bombs falling on Olive Road, sounding like an express train coming down on it. So perhaps Olive Road was targeted as well.
I am amazed though that they rebuilt them in the same style, because where I lived in southeast London,
yes.
the bomb sites, when they built them up, tended to be very
old, it's
sort
different.
of quite ugly houses
Yes.
in between.
I think
That was a very frightening night.
Yes.
When we had that big,
Yes.
when the East End and Docklands
Yes.
was, we could see the fires
Yes.
from Cricklewood.
Yes.
That was terrible. And another disaster was when, because some of the people that lived
Yes.
nearer into town used to use the tube stations, go down and spend the nights there. And the sirens went one night, and there was a whole crowds of people going down, and somebody slipped, and it caused everybody, and the death toll was much, much higher. And the thing about it was a false alarm anyway. So we did have disasters like that.
On this point, you raised the style of housing. The thing I observed, I lived those days where Anson Road becomes Temple Road, and Park Avenue facing the roads across near the park. And in the next road, Helena Road, not too far away from us actually, 2 or 3 houses in about late 1940 were totally destroyed. But after the war, it's not the only case. I presume most houses were leasehold in those days, and I presume, this wasn't actually town planning, I presume the owners of the ground had simply insisted on the house be built in exactly the same style as the other houses. You can't tell now which they were. They were completely demolished. That's it. But it applies also. Hamilton Road, where the corner houses of Kemble were destroyed, you can tell instantly a quite different style. Now, in other words, it may have depended on the ownership of the land. By now, and certainly pre-1914 houses were around here when virtually never rebuilt the same style. Sorry, I'm breaking in. Sorry.
This gentleman here was waiting, and then
Yes.
it's this lady again.
We live on 95 Temple Road, and I believe there used to be a confectionery there. Or part of the house was used to sell
Well,
sweets.
at the end of the road,
Yes,
yes,
at
that
the
was
very
Fred.
end of the
Yes,
Yes.
yes, that was a sweet shop
And
there.
I'm just wondering if you have any...
Fred was very, very naughty.
and who was Fred?
He was the owner. He owned that and the 2 flats adjoining that.
Because I think we bought it from
He
his
used to
wife.
sell one single cigarette to boys that still at school. He was very naughty. I had to go down and have a word with him. Yes, that was there. And the sweet shop, in Munro's, that was there then. And the shop, but it was a little tiny food shop with a post office counter. I remember.
Mr. Evans'
name. No, long time before Mr. Evans. And he had 2 daughters, Mary and people's names. They ran the shop. It was a little corner shop. So that's always been there.
I remember Fred's when I was a child. Yeah. He wasn't selling us cigarettes then. This lady here.
Of course, the sweet ration, I was going to say, rationing went on into 1950s for some things, and I think sweets were the very last.
Yes, they were.
Yes, they came off.
Yes.
Because I was talking to one of my sons today about this, and he remembers going down with his green ration book to get his sweets when he was about 8, so that would be about...
Wendy's nodding her head back there, she remembers that.
Yes, she remembers that, yeah.
This lady here.
I live in the Ivy Road purpose-built maisonettes.
Oh, you do?
And I was told when I moved in there in the early 80s that there was Mrs. Briggs who ran the whole 8 of them, and they were built for the Clippies at London Transport.
Oh.
I'd like to know whether that's true, and I'd also like to know where the Home Lodge connection is.
Now, Home Lodge, I've always liked that house. There was 2 sisters lived there for years going back. But I think when I first came here, there was a scout leader lived in that, and I don't know whether he owned it. I didn't really know much about it, but I've always thought that was a nice house. That
No home.
Really?
Yes.
Yes.
Why were they built as maisonettes? Because it wasn't the time for maisonettes.
I don't
When
know.
you look at Ivy Road.
Well, like Temple Road. I don't know. I suppose it gave, because as I say, nobody owned, when I moved there, nobody owned there. People didn't have, working people didn't have own houses.
Was Home Lodge like a nobility place?
Well, as I say, I can't really remember in 1940, but when my boys were old enough to be cubs and scouts, I know that the scoutmaster lived there, so that would be sort of the 50s. But I can't remember, I don't know if he lived there in the 40s. It wasn't used, it wasn't the vicarage, because the vicarage has always been in...
Answer.
Yes,
Answer.
yes.
Were you special if you lived in Home Lodge?
I know it's not very far away from Temple Road, but really we only sort of knew the people in Temple Road that much, you know, unless you were involved with, as I say, once I got involved with the Scouts, and because everything my children did I got involved in. I was a Brownie guider, and I belonged to St John Ambulance and all sorts of things because of, you know, the one-on and things. But
there's nothing in there about it.
That Home Lodge, no, it'd be nice to know, wouldn't it? I don't know.
Nothing in the archive here about it.
Because it's a place on its own, it's like none of the others, is it? You know, it's...
I understood it was to do with the water pumping station, along with the ones along here on the Park Lodge and Park.
I know the two at the end of Langton Road belong to the people in the
but they're modern, aren't they?
Yes, they're modern. Belong to the people, the boss at the pumping station.
This lady here has another. Oh, and that lady, she's
Yeah,
sorry, lady at the end there. Sorry, I do apologise. I can't see it.
Stand up.
Do you know what was before the bingo board? And do you know anything about the Express Dairy?
Oh, the Express Dairy. Now, the Express Dairies, you mean that the round by the station?
Claremont Road.
Yeah.
There was a long chimney where...
That's right, yes. Well, that was where they did the bottling. But in the Broadway in 1940, there was an Express Dairy shop. You really could buy milk, and they got most marvellous blue and white tires. I think some of them are still there. There was also a Lions tea shop in the next block, because I know Mary and I used to buy chocolate rolls and fruit slices that they always sold.
And the other thing, my mother used to say that she used to hear about horn go off or something for the factory where everyone used to go.
Yeah.
Was that Smith?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
That's right, yes.
And do you know what was there before the bingo hall? Was Ferrari?
Well, that must have been the dance hall then, wasn't it?
The dance hall is still there.
Oh, the big hole on the corner.
Yeah.
Oh dear, what was there?
I lost that.
They just said Ferraris.
Was it the coal merchants? There was a coal merchants along there somewhere.
Coal merchants and Ferrari.
Ah, yes.
Because I know there was the coal merchants, because we used to have coal delivered. And the coal cellar was the cupboard under the back stairs. Oh, on delivery day on a wet day, it was dreadful.
This lady, and this lady, sorry, that lady has also, she has her hand up.
Thanks, Mary.
Not doing
Where
radio
is she?
facilitating. This lady here. Did you have a question?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Do you know anything about the railway, the air raid shelter at the bottom of Wartime Road?
Which road?
Wartime Road. At the bottom
Yes.
of
Now I don't remember that, but I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in Langton. She was hoping to come tonight, but she didn't in the end. And she talked about that air raid shelter, because they used to go in their 90s and then dash back. Yes, it was there. Yes,
the
but
railways have just filled it with concrete.
Yes.
To stabilise the embankment.
Yes.
It has its uses then.
Yes,
Yes.
I saw them working up there, and I said, "What are you up to?" And he said, "We're filling it with concrete."
Yes, but as I say, that's only round the corner from me, but I don't remember that at all.
It's interesting to know it was used.
Yes. Oh yes.
Thank you.
This lady here then.
Yeah. I just wondered what Gladstone Park was like then. I've been told there used to be a bandstand.
Oh yes, that was lovely. You remember the bandstand? There used to be the bandstand, and then the house was a restaurant.
Yes.
And we used to go up there on Saturday and Sunday mornings, and there used to be a trio of elderly gentlemen, a string trio. I've never heard Lara's theme played any better than they did, and their music used to blow all over the place, and they would giggle, and we'd sit out there with our ice cream and coffee and listen to this. And I wanted to ask you about Dollis Hill House. Now, it was on the news, wasn't it? But I was called away and didn't hear the outcome. Is it at last going to be something done to it?
Well, it's still unclear. The present council...
Because I know I got involved with that as well, and I believe I was told that they'd got to get money, and then be a charity, and then they could make a request to the lottery people for some money to because it can't be pulled down. It's a listed building. Right.
They've got the lottery funding, but they've got to match it.
Oh, I see. Yes. It was on the national news, but I didn't hear the end of it.
What will it be?
Well, I don't know. It's had...
it's like it used to be. It's a company called Training for Life. But it used to be.
Yes, I've been to 2 wedding receptions there. It was very nice, and there used to be the bowling green, the local, what do you call the shopkeepers? Association.
Rotary Club?
Yeah, Rotary Club. They
Yes,
used to
yes,
have lunches there, and then you could get a very nice meal. My eldest daughter, her first job was a job in this library. She left school and here, and she used to go up to that place and have lunch. Used to do nice lunches too in Dollis's house, and it's in such a mess now. I mean, it's been set fire to and everything, and it would be lovely to have it. I think 1 or 2 suggestions were made. I think a brewery firm wanted to open it, but there was a lot of dissension from local people, and they just didn't want late night drunks, I suppose, and they said there wasn't enough parking space and that sort of thing. But it would be nice because it's doesn't belong to the local authority. It's got it's listed building, and it's a thing on its own, and nobody wants to take responsibility for it, I suppose.
Another question, this lady here and then this lady here.
When it was a restaurant and your daughter used to go there, would you say they were sort of affordable meals for the local?
Well, Wendy will tell you that.
Yes. Ordinary cafe, you could just go and get tea or a cake or...
But they did meals. Didn't they do meals as well?
Well, when I went there, it was just snacks and things. But I mean, I worked in here, and it was. I mean, it was as far really to walk home as to walk up there. If Mum wasn't at home, then I used to walk up there. But no, it wasn't anything grand at all.
Oh no, but it was a nice setting. That was the same with the weddings. They made lovely photos because people used to stand, and it had a lovely backdrop of the park and the pond and everything, and they used to be very nice.
This lady here then.
Hello. Do you remember anything about the swimming pool that used to be in Gladstone Park? Did you go in?
Yes. Now, I don't know why, but I never learned to swim, and I used to take my children to concerts and all sorts of things, take them all over the place to see things. But I never ever took them to a swimming pool. But that was an open swimming pool, but we used to go on Sunday mornings.
We used to, when we were at school in Mora Road.
Yes, they used to. School parties used to go there. But I think because you need such a lot of supervision, I think wages and everything else, it wasn't viable, and it hasn't actually been closed all that. Well, I mean, time goes so quickly for me now. I don't know, but. It was very popular, wasn't it?
It was a strange pool. Do you remember? Because it had a slopey side, bright turquoise blue, and very slopey side, so you couldn't get out very easily.
That's the excuse you used to make when I used to say it's time to go home. I can't get out.
Yes.
Where was it?
Tried to get out of
right at the
Donish Hill.
You know where the children's playground is.
Yeah.
When you go up that wall, and there's another entrance there at the top of Donish Hill. Yeah. There's a car park now. Yes, it's a mound.
You know where the statues are?
Yeah.
The memorial to the Holocaust.
Have they been replaced? They took them away, didn't they, for something? Yes. Yes, well, I mean, that was, you know, it was like going out for the day when the children were small. Go to Gladstone Park and take your lunch and go in the swimming pool, go in the swings, and I think it's listed as being having the cleanest air in Willesden because of the lack of industry, and it's high up. And also, I think that Bellotti has said that it's got a lot of wildlife that other places haven't got. It's quite a healthy place to live, so get away from the smoke.
Oh, one last question here,
yes.
I think.
How is it that the Luftwaffe bombed Cricklewood railway sidings and not the post office?
Why, would you like to see the post office going? Because my daughter works for the post office, the most hated woman in England. Yes, of course there was there was the sorting office and the post.
It was a sore thumb for the Luftwaffe, wasn't it? On top of the hill.
Oh, you mean the research station?
Yeah.
Well, I think it was heavily camouflaged.
Oh, is it?
And as I say, it was kept very secret because I didn't know all about this stuff.
Park. Alan Turing and the valve computers.
Yeah. I know that.
Do you know any stories about that?
No, not as I say. It was all very secret.
What about Churchill? Did he ever visit?
I think he was involved too.
Was there a secret exit?
Yes, that's right. Yes, it did. As I say, that we didn't know about that at the time. Even though my neighbour round the corner used to lock some of the men that worked there, the workmen, lodged with her round in Langton Road. But
which side of the post office was it? The Grants Reservoir side, wasn't it?
No,
it's at the road. Yes, it's the end of those houses that face that entrance of Gladstone Park. There's a hill going up, and you can see the I think is it a private school now?
Yeah, you can actually do tours.
It was a private school.
Yeah, you can do tours.
Cadbury Schweppes for a long time, wasn't it? Yeah.
Was it?
Yes. Cadbury Schweppes had one of their, sort of headquarters, or headquarters, if you remember.
Yeah.
Time?
It's
all right. You've got Well, thank you very much for coming. I've enjoyed it immensely. I always say I don't get out much.